Round 3 recap of the Winter Swiss tournament. This is a 60 plus 30, so it's 30-second increment. I have the black pieces against Michael Kern. He's rated in the 1800s, and he started off with one d4. He's played both d4 and e4 against me recently, most recently e4. And I know he's a London player, so I played knight f6, bishop f4, g6. And in terms of my preparation, I looked at what happens if he plays e3, c3, knight f3, kind of your typical London setup. Here he plays knight to c3 immediately, and after the game, he said that he thought I may play this line, even though the last time we played, and he played the London, I played d5 in a c5 type setup. I didn't do the kingside fianchetto. He was expecting this, and he took the prep one level deeper watching GothamChess, who recommended knight c3 and e4. So this already had me thinking, and I wasn't sure the best way to set up against it. I wanted to play d6 and bishop g7 originally, but when you see this knight on c3, white's ready to play e4 and create this huge center. And that'll actually transpose us into what's called the Pirc Defense. It's an e4 opening. I used to play the Pirc Defense as my main weapon back in high school, but that's been a long time, and I wasn't completely comfortable in it, but I wasn't sure what else to do. D5 is kind of the critical try. This is what high-level players play, the engine's favorite move. And the idea is you want to meet e4 with d takes e4 or knight takes e4. So you want to control that e4 square. So instead, I played bishop g7, Michael played e4, and now d6. So here we're in a Pirc defense. Bishop to c4, eyeing this pawn. And I was kind of happy to see this. I think normally when you have the bishop on f4, you're going to see queen to d2, pawn to f3, queenside castle, and then storm the king side. So bishop to c4 felt a little bit like it was mixing plans to me, and I went with c6. The other option I was considering was maybe a6 or castling right away. I didn't want to castle too quickly because I know how fierce this attack can be coming down the h-file with the queen and bishop on this diagonal trying to trade off g7. So I play c6, and the idea here is I'm thinking b5, b4, and there's also the potential of maybe playing d5 in some cases, or even knight takes e4, and when this knight recaptures, then playing d5, forking knight and bishop. So Michael plays knight f3, castle, queen d2, so he's eyeing this idea, and I'm pretty sure here he wants to queenside castle, even though he hasn't chosen a direction yet. So I play b5, and now the threat is to play b4, kicking the knight, and knight takes e4. So the only real good move for white is bishop to d3, reinforcing this pawn. Rook to e8. I wasn't sure what to play here. I didn't really like the idea of bishop h6 trading off these two bishops. So the reason I played rook to e8 is so that when bishop h6 is played, I can tuck my bishop back on h8 and avoid the trade, and the h6 bishop will not be attacking my rook on f8. So this is a way to avoid the trade of the dark square bishops. Keep this in mind because this theme is very common with kingside fianchettos when a bishop is trying to trade off that bishop on g7. Queenside castle, and now I try to create an attack on the queen side. Queen to a5, the threat is pawn to b4, kicking the knight, followed by queen takes a2, which is currently defended by the knight. King b1 played, pawn to b4. Not the most accurate move. It's a little bit better to start with bishop to e6, creating this dual threat on the a2 square, and this threatens to play pawn to b4, kicking the knight. By playing b4 first, this is potentially a wasted move because in the other line I don't have to play b4 and white will probably play b3 anyways to prevent this threat. So he moves the knight back, bishop e6, hitting this pawn twice, queen and bishop, pawn to b3. And now long term, look at this bishop on g7, cutting across the dark squares. This is something that I've seen quite a bit when analyzing with Leela, and AlphaZero does the same thing. You try to create these long-term weaknesses in your opponent's camp, keep the threats alive, because sometimes that can be enough to win the game. So I like that these dark squares are opened up, and I'm looking at kind of queen a3 ideas coming down the line. On to c5. This is trying to chip away the d4 square so that I can open up that bishop on the long diagonal. d5 played. And now bishop to g4. So I'm ready to trade off this knight, even though it does open up the g file to bring one of white's rooks into the attack. What I'm thinking here is I can probably always bail out with queen to a3, forcing queen to c1 and get the queen trade. So if I ever feel white's attack is too strong, I was thinking I could always get that queen trade. h3 played, and now I pretty much have to take, because once the bishop is here, if I'm going to retreat, that's probably a wasted move because h3 could be useful for white to play g4 next. So I take, pawn takes, knight d7. I'm not in a rush to play queen a3 because it's always going to be met by queen c1. Bishop to h6, trying to trade off my strong bishop, so I tuck him away. Pawn to f4. Now at this moment, I'm trying to figure out, is white's attack strong enough that I can't generate my own attack on the queen side? And I can see that the idea is probably f5, trying to open up these light pawns. Like if white can play f5, h5, h4, open up these light pawns, get a rook on the g file, that's when I'll be in big trouble. So what can I do to generate counterplay? Queen a3 is met by queen c1. It's not very easy to get a knight into one of these two squares. So what I need to do is I need to look to play c4. And I considered playing c4 right here. But for some reason I opted not to, and the engine really likes it. So pawn to c4 immediately. This bishop can't really take c4 because knight takes pawn, hitting the queen, opening this bishop up. And if pawn takes, now I have the c5 square for the knight. Both knights attacking e4. This knight's now finally ready to come into the attack. Attack is much stronger for black than in the game line, and it's faster than white's attack as well. In the game, though, I played knight to b6. The idea is c4, but I was a little bit trigger shy. I didn't want to push that pawn up immediately to c4, which I should have. f3, reinforcing this pawn. Rook c8. Really getting ready to play c4, and my idea was I was thinking of doing an exchange sacrifice and taking with the rook first, and after bishop takes, and then recapturing with the knight. Bishop c4. Knight out to h5. It's stronger to play knight f to d7, but I was actually a little bit afraid of this move because knight f to d7 commits the knight over here on the queen side, and now this h-pawn runs free, whereas knight h5, I played in the game, this blocks the h-pawn. So I was playing this as a defensive move, trying to slow down white's attack, knowing that I still had some play over here. Probably the strongest move is to take this bishop right away, though. Fix these ugly pawns on the c file, knowing that I still have the diagonal play, and there's queen a3 ideas cutting across the board, which we'll see in the game. So knight h5, rook g1. Now I play queen to a3, queen c1, and I have this nice tactic. Knight takes c4. If white trades queens, I take back with check, so that would win me a piece. So he has to take on c4, and now instead of trading queens, I take the f-pawn. So now I'm one pawn up, e-pawn's attacked, and the knight's attacked. Queen f1, queen takes e4. So this is 2 pawns up. I can't easily get my queen on this long diagonal, though, because this square is guarded by the knight, and this is guarded by the pawn. So I'm trying to figure out, how can I increase my attack from here? And Michael plays a scary-looking move, rook to g5. The idea is he wants to take my knight, and if pawn takes back, put a rook or queen on this g file, my king is trapped. So that knight is threatened to be captured immediately. And here I was trying to think, do I need to retreat the knight or can I create counterplay? And this was an idea that I had been looking at. I play rook to b8. What's happening is the queen pins this pawn on c2, so that pawn can't move. And I want to play b3. If a takes b, rook takes b3 back, then the pawn can't capture the rook because it's pinned. And this combination of rook, queen, and bishop should be able to checkmate this king. None of the white pieces are over here to help with the defense. Rook takes h5 was played pretty quickly by Michael, and after the game he said this was a spot where he should have spent more time. I think king to c1 was interesting. The engine kind of solves it quickly. The idea for the engine is queen to e3 check. If the king moves, you still play b3. If a takes, There's actually rook takes b3, c takes, queen takes. It's a mate in 16 moves, but this looks pretty strong because the other rook is coming in. So king c1 doesn't quite work, but I think it was a little bit harder to figure out for black. b3 played, and this is a forced checkmate in 4 moves. The issue is pawn takes pawn is defended by the queen, and it's a double check. Both pawn and rook checking the king. So this is very close to a checkmate. And queen takes c2, followed by queen takes a2 is also a checkmate threat. So there's really no way out of this. It's mate in 4 with best play. b3 played, rook takes b3, queen e3, rook b1, and rook takes c1 checkmate. So I think the biggest takeaway for me was this opening position, being a little bit more prepared. If I'm going to go into this King's Indian line against the London setup, I definitely have to be ready for this. This wasn't on my radar at all, so props to Michael for doing this prep. And he said he was happy during the game because he could tell I was surprised by this move and he could tell I was nervous because I did not want to get checkmated in 15-20 moves in the Pirc Defense. That was my round 3 Winter Swiss recap. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you for round number 4. Thanks for watching.